Right. So depending on your job title, it might not be, it might not like simply be enough to have a curation of sexy looking deliverables on your portfolio. And I should know because like early on in my design career, a lot of us like prioritize, having really good images, maybe on your dribble or your portfolio, just paste like five fine UI and like, yeah, this is my case study and stuff. But proper product teams are actually not particularly concerned with how great your UI is, especially seeing as the field is becoming more and more saturated. So yeah, essentially they're more concerned now with how well you can make design decisions and the thought processes that go into like the solutions that you build. So essentially, as a product or UX designer, a very key skill for professionals is the ability to communicate the decisions you make to different stakeholders, to different people. And yeah, so I'm just going to be sharing few quick tips that would help you think about how best to craft your next case study. First is to basically figure out who your audience is. And for that, you have to sort of take on your case study with a product or design problem mindset. You have to treat it exactly the way you would treat a design problem. And essentially, you're figuring out your audience, who your audience is by asking yourself questions like, who is the primary persona that would be reading this? What is their context and what's the core thing I want to communicate to them with this case study? And you essentially want to be careful not to try to make your case study be everything for everyone. I know that a lot of us might be lazy and like you once you manage to document that one case study, you post it everywhere else. You're taking it to Behance, to Dribble, to Medium, to your portfolio, just paste everything like that. But yeah, like typically that one version of your case study cannot effectively communicate to all the audiences that will be reading it. So yeah, there are only so many use cases that one case study can cater to, and you have to really think about when you're crafting it. At that point, you have to really think about who you're trying to reach on that specific platform. Um, so yeah, you could be writing a case study. For instance, you could be writing a case study for Medium. Maybe you want to have a larger you want to reach a larger audience, or you want to put yourself out there. You could be writing one for your mentors if you're part of a design program and essentially you have an assignment. You could be writing one for other designers. Maybe you're trying to teach them something, or you want to teach designers a new skill, or you want them to learn something from your case study. You could also be writing one for yourself at work for documentation purposes. And yeah, the most popular word, if you're looking for a job, you might be writing one for recruiters and hiring managers because you want them to essentially read it and reach out to you. So from the get-go, you want to make sure that you're aligning your story to your audience and the specific platform you'll be posting it on. If your main objective for creating this case study, for example, is that you want to get a job in the industry, then it would be a good idea to prioritize recruiters and hiring managers because they're ultimately the ones that make the decision, or rather, recruiters are the ones that screen candidates, and hiring managers are the ones that make the final decision. So, with this in mind, you could, for example, maybe put yourself in the hiring manager's shoes and think about the fact that um, they might be reviewing over 100 portfolios, for instance, for a particular position, and each portfolio has 1 to 3 case studies. But because their time is limited, they can only skim through and spend about 30 seconds on each case study. So, with that in mind, you would tailor it in a certain way to make sure that even if they're spending just 30 seconds, they can get the core message that you're trying to communicate, or they can be impressed enough to actually reach out to you. Also, if you were posting it on Medium, for example, you'll be thinking about how to make it entertain, like you'll be thinking about how to make it entertaining in essence, because it's a leisure read. Maybe somebody is having lunch or like sitting on the bus and they're just like casually reading your article and it turns out to be a case study. So you want to make it as entertaining as possible or as engaging as possible. That's when you're posting on Medium. So essentially, the point is that you want to tailor your case study to your audience. And this might mean having to create multiple versions of the case study based on the platform that you intend to post it on. And the audience you're targeting you're essentially tweaking it for the audience you're targeting so that you get to like reach out to them at the point you get to like basically communicate what you need to on the platform and communicate what they need to get from you as well. So yeah, like I said, if you're posting on Medium, you tailor it to the audience. If you're posting on your portfolio or depending on who you're writing for, you just really need to have that persona in mind at the point where you start out writing your case study. Next, you need to give your case study a title. This can be, I know this seems very simple, but it's actually very important. But you also do not want to sweat the title too much at first because essentially you want to go with your guts and then pen something down for the first time. Sometimes you might have a fully formed idea that springs to mind when you actually start out writing your case study. And it might be a great angle and have a really unique approach, but actually I found that it's very rare for you to have a fully formed idea at the time you start. So in my experience, your idea might start out as a broad topic and you essentially play around with it until you come up with a body of work that you feel like, okay, I have something here, I have something else worth writing about. Yeah, but essentially starting with the title is really good for just framing your like scoping your frame of mind, and also you want to make the title is something that would likely change over time. Yeah, like during your course of writing, you might change the title like up to 20 times. You might change the title after you finish the entire thing and you're just like, okay, yeah, now that I have a very good idea of what this is, I think that the title should be this instead. But yeah, essentially you just want to start off with a strong title that you think would give whoever sees it for the first time some context around what your project is about. Yeah, so essentially it starts with the title. And then next, you want to define your areas of focus. And a good way of doing this is to start by writing an outline. Actually, this is a good way to start with writing anything. You need an outline to just frame everything so that you know how to fill in the gaps. The essence of starting with an outline is to lay out your thoughts before you start going deep into the details. So I'll show you what a typical case study outline looks like. Yeah, so this is what a typical case study outline looks like. I'm sure that we're all used to seeing, overview, problem statements, and all of that. And essentially, what this does is it helps you understand the big picture of your project so that you can decide how best to structure your case study. Or in some cases, if the project is big enough, you might need more than one case study. Yeah, depending on the scope of the project. So yeah, you want to start with the outline like this. It typically has these 7 sections above, and then you start filling in bullet points under each section. And when you start out, don't worry about like the sentence of the structure. Don't try to say, oh wow, maybe I'm not writing this well, or this English is too simple, let me complicate it out. No, just like write it the way it is in your head. Just you're essentially just trying to get it out of your head as fast as possible. And also it really helps to have some of this already written down, especially like while you were working on the project. So I would always advocate for like documenting while you're working on a project. I know that day-to-day work might be very fast-paced, and not everybody would have the time to, start writing paragraphs of, oh, today this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing. Yeah, but essentially, like even at the time when you start the project, you can just have a notepad or a file where you just go to add bullet points or sentences that highlight certain things that you had to do at certain points in time and why you're doing it. So for instance, oh, we're doing user research, or we're interviewing users because people are having difficulty making payments on the platform, or users are churning, blah, blah, blah. And we think that user interviews would be a good way to do this. That's even long, but you can essentially just write like one bullet point. This is what we did now, or this is what I'm doing now, just so that when you come back to it, to it, like when you're ready to write your case study, you will essentially have somewhere to start from, and you won't have to like be trying to rack your head, okay, so what did we do there this time and what did we do then? Because like when you see one sentence or one bullet point, you can essentially like turn that into a paragraph. So yeah, documents as much as possible, as often as possible. And okay, when you have this outline and you can see the big picture, then you can start like filling in the details under each section. So let's touch more on the details that goes into each section of the outline. For the overview, for instance, you have this part is essentially for setting up context on the project. So you're supposed to more or less provide a quick summary of the company or product that you're working on. You want to make sure that you're answering questions like, is this a school assignment, or is it a real world project, or is it even a passion project, something that you just picked up to do on the side? What was the brief? Were you assigned, if it's real work, like were you assigned to do an entirely new product from the ground up, or like are you redesigning an existing platform, or essentially are you just adding a new feature to something that already exists? You know, you really need to scope it out in this overview. And you want to also answer questions like, what was the team like, and what was your role in the project? Were you like a contributor? Like, essentially, what role did you play in the project? And also in the overview, you want to like just include a sentence on what the results of the project was. Just think of the overview like a summary, essentially, so that if I was glancing through and I didn't have time to read the entire thing at that point in time, just looking at the summary, I would be able to know if like this is something I want to continue reading and maybe like bookmark it, or like if this is even worth my time from the summary. And essentially, yeah, in the overview, you want to describe what the main findings of your project was, or like what the outcome of your project is. And you can typically, the overview is also something that you can typically rewrite over and over again, even like at the point where you're done, or like during the course of writing. Most of these things can change, but essentially at first you just want to like put down one or two sentences that describe these particular things I've mentioned. Yeah, next you have the problem statement. With the problem statement, you're essentially trying to describe the context of the problem, and you basically want the reader to know why the problem was important, and what problem you were aiming to solve when you basically set out on this project. And yeah, typically every project should have goals or what you're trying to achieve. So for this particular section, you're trying to help, think of it as you trying to help whoever is reading the case study to learn more about people that use your solution. So you just want to say, oh, who are the people benefiting from this problem that I solved or that I'm solving? And you can list what the categories of the people are. Maybe if you can categorize them in a certain way, they have certain things in common. You can also include what their motivations are, or like what concerns these people might have. You know, just try to like describe it. For example, I'm trying to solve a problem for people that shop, and maybe I'm saying that, like I said, it seems like they're having some friction towards the end of the shopping journey because they don't make the payments to like take off their items in cart and blah blah blah. And yeah, I'm just describing the problem around that and why I even set out to solve it that way. Is maybe it's maybe it was, if I'm working, if it's a real world scenario and you're working, maybe the business is being affected by this, like the business's revenue, and they're like, okay, so we need you as a designer to come in and address churn and figure out what's wrong and why our users are not buying items. Essentially, so you want to like describe this set of people, like, okay, so who is the average shopper? And this usually requires you to interact with them a bit. So you, in as much as you can make certain assumptions while designing, it's always very good to have concrete data. So yeah, maybe you're doing interviews to actually meet these people, or you're looking at your data analytics dashboard to see some particular characteristics that you can use to describe who these users are and essentially why you're designing the solution for them. So that's about users. For your roles and responsibility part of the section, you want to essentially shed more light on what the team was like what was the size of your team, what was your role in the project, were you the only designer, did you collaborate with certain people? This is also a good opportunity to highlight other members of the team and give credit to them if you can. Yeah, most of the time. I know that sometimes you might think that, okay, if I take credit for all this work, or if I say that, oh, I designed the entire thing from scratch, blah blah blah, it will make me look good. But actually, in the real sense, a lot of product teams would like to see how well you collaborate with other people, and so this is something that would be really good to highlight in your case study. Also, in terms of scope and constraints, you want to, if you're writing about a real project for a real client or team, it's always important to explain what constraints and limitations you faced while you were working. Say, for example, if you had technical limitations like your team needed to ship really fast, or you had certain business KPIs that you had to keep in mind. Maybe your company's goal for this year is to be more reliable, to ship products faster, to do this and this. Essentially, you need to, these things typically exist when you're working a real job and trying to solve real problems. So you should make sure to state this in your case study. And even if it's not a real world project, if it's a personal um, side project, or like something that you're doing on the side to just solve a problem, you could also highlight personal constraints that you faced, like maybe collaborating with other people in a remote environment, or even having limited access to users to interview with because of like the COVID period and everything being remote. You could also like highlight these factors in your scope and constraints. But basically, you get the point. You have to state whatever unique factors or obstacles you had to consider or that you faced during the course of your project. You should definitely highlight it in your case study. And don't forget, like for this part, you're essentially just writing like one or two sentences. Don't overthink it. You're not like trying to fill out paragraphs and write the entire story right now. You're just like looking at each subheading. Okay, describe any unique limiting factors. What's one thing I can remember that is a limiting factor? You pen it down, and you pen down as many as you can remember, and then you move to the next section, because essentially you're just like you're filling out the outline at this point. And yeah, and for the process part, so I'm going to like make it a breakaway section because the process part is very important. Essentially, you want to give this, oh, my process and what I did part the bulk of your efforts, and this is where you will document the steps you took to solve the problem, and essentially you're answering questions like, what did you do? In terms of what research methods did you use, if you used any at all, or what methods did you use generally using logic? Because like maybe we're not limiting this to design and there are other people trying to write case studies. Essentially, you want to tell them what you did and why you did it. Like, why did you choose to use that method? For example, analytics might reveal that in the previous example I gave, analytics might reveal that, oh, customers are struggling and sometimes they abandon their items when they're trying to check out on an e-commerce website. And then you wanted to understand why. So you're like, oh, we wanted to understand why. So we conducted 8 usability tests. That's essentially you stating a method that you used and why you used it, providing context as to your process. You also want to answer questions like, what was the result? So for example, this method that you used, how did it help you achieve certain goals? What did you learn from the method? For example, what is there anything that you would do differently next time? Is there anything that you learned during the course of the um, during the course of using that method that helped you improve your workflow in whatever way? So these are things that you can include in the process documentation part. But most importantly, though, you have to be careful to not put too much focus on your process. I know it seems a bit confusing. I mean, you want to focus on your process, but you also don't want to put too much focus on your process in the sense that you should never treat your process or each step in your process like a checklist of things that you have to do to prove that, okay, yes, I've done all the required steps. And I think that's something I see a lot of junior designers, like you will pick out, you say, okay, I did user research and I did usability test, and you just write it like that. But essentially, you're not just writing steps to say, okay, I've written steps and this is what makes it a case study. Each step has to have a purpose, and you need to communicate how that step that you used has helped you to actually find your solution. So, yeah, what I'm saying is that if you look at these two sentences or paragraphs, for example, you see how the first one just sounds like a checklist of activities. And then I did my interviews, and once I completed that, I went ahead to synthesize the findings. Nope. The essence is that you want to, the design process is not a set of formulas. And if anything, I don't want you to leave this lesson feeling like you now have a list of steps that you can use to complete your case study or to use before you're allowed to say you have a case study. No, they're more or less guidelines, and you have to take the time to understand and value why you're actually using whatever steps you're using. And then you think about how best to communicate why you used it, and why the steps mattered essentially, and how they helped you to find your solution. So this is what essentially shows that you're thinking critically as a product person or a UX person. So if you look at the second instance, you might notice that it's a bit longer, yes, but it's also much stronger because it goes beyond just talking about what you did. In this way, you can even position as a more thoughtful person or a more like mature person, because you are not just saying what you did, you're also adding some context as to why you did it and like some insights. And another tip that would come in here, you can also break up the length of the text. Like if you're looking at this and saying, oh, this is really long, you can break up the text by using photos and illustrations. And this takes me to the next step, which is to include photos and artifacts to show how you did the work. When working on a project, most times, chances are that you create artifacts anyways, like during the course of the process. Maybe you're creating wireframes to communicate to your product manager that this is how I'm thinking about the solution, or you're creating user flows to communicate to your engineers that, okay, so this is going to be the logic of this particular flow. Essentially, like, you will create artifacts most of the time. So it's very good to show these artifacts in your case study. So before you include things like flow diagrams, for example, if you took down notes when you were initially brainstorming the idea for the case study, then you should definitely include those notes. If you made sketches to communicate something or an early idea to your stakeholders, you should definitely include those. If you did medium fidelity prototypes like wireframes on Whimsical or Miro, you should definitely include those. The point is, include your artifacts so that it also helps to like break long bodies of text and like show that you did the actual work. Um, and then after that, you also want to, or in relation to that anyways, you want to make sure that it's a priority to share what you learned from each step. So with the example I just gave, if you created wireframes to communicate something to your product manager, you're not just going to say, okay, I created wireframes, then I did this. Nope, you actually say what happened after you shared the wireframes with the product manager. What was the feedback you gave? What was the outcome of that whole process? Because a lot of this is what makes you a UX professional, yeah? So if you carried out user interviews or you tested, what was the outcome of the test? Include that in the case study. You could be essentially aim to answer questions like, what did the user say when I was testing? Or if you created user flows or wireframes, what kind of feedback did you actually get when you shared this artifact with people? What was the outcome of the test that you carried out? Um, yeah, include all of these. These are what we term as insights. They're like valuable feedback for your work. And it doesn't matter if like you shared the wireframes and they were like, oh, this is crap or this is not the idea. Include that in the case study as well. It's an entire journey. It's not like you're not like just polishing up to look good, or we don't just want to see the final product. You also have to like show all the rough edges. So make sure that you also want to make sure that your insights are interesting and easy to understand. And if somebody, just think about it in a way that if somebody were looking through my case study or glancing through my case study, would they feel compelled to like retweet a random sentence or a random paragraph? Have I written anything that would be bars to people, like they would be willing to share? So you want to make it that simple so that people are actually inspired to share it. And you want to talk about things that didn't go well, like I said, and whatever lessons that you learned from those experiences that helped your team to make other decisions or like helped your team to be smarter. Essentially, just try to teach people or teach the person reading it something that they didn't already know. Don't like, I see a lot of like copying and pasting these days with case studies as well. You don't want to say, okay, so I did the user research, and then the point is that don't give, try not to give typical answers. If you think about it, if I were a hiring manager and I had to do like hundreds of these every day, if I keep looking at, if I look through 10 case studies and they all look the same, chances that chances are I won't reach out to all 10 of them. So what, in the sense, you want to think about what would make me stand out to this person. If I want them to reach out to me, what's the one thing or the one unique approach I can add to this case study that would actually make them reach out to me? So yeah, we want to aim to teach people what they don't already know, and provide reasonable or like valuable insights. Let someone go, oh, when they're reading a case study. Um, Okay, and now we're at the outcomes and results phase. So this part is actually where you need to finish really strong. Because if you remember, in the hiring manager scenario, I would most likely scan through and end at this point. Like if I were trying to glance through your case study, I would like just scroll, and look at the outcome. So you have to make sure that there's something reasonable there. You want to answer questions like, oh, did the solution actually solve the problem that users were facing, or did it not? If not, why? What did you learn from this? Did you ultimately reach the goals that you first set to accomplish? If it was the business's goals, did you reach that? If it was your personal goals, did you actually reach it with the design or with the solution? What were the key things that you helped if it was for a business, what did you help the business accomplish with this solution? These things are very important because depending on the platform or scenario, you can essentially, like a lot of these steps, you can decide to maybe skip one or two or like not write too much under each particular section. But the outcome is something that you can ultimately never skip because it's what identifies your work as being effective. So I know, okay, maybe there are some solutions. Maybe you could be writing a case study on a passion project that you did or a personal project that you did, and maybe you didn't feel like it impacted anyone else in a particular way. You just want to post it. Okay, that one might be visually heavy, but still, it would have an outcome. Like maybe you shared it to someone and they used it, or used it on your personal project and you think it enhanced the visual value of it. Essentially, you just always aim to have an outcome in your case study. If you work for a business, try to tie it back to the business and how it helped that particular team to improve productivity, or how it helped them to make more revenue because you figured out what's making users churn and blah, blah, blah. The point is always trying to identify the direct result of your work on a particular project and share this in your case study. That's essentially your first draft. And you want to go over everything that you currently have and now think about it from if you're a designer, think about it like you're designing the reading experience of your case study. So now you, if you're, when you started out, you've identified the persona. Say, for example, I was writing for Medium or I was writing for my portfolio. It's now I then think, okay, so this is my persona. And if I'm trying to tailor this case study to my hiring manager, to a hiring manager, for example, or to a recruiter, I will probably need to edit certain details to match what I think their experience is going to be like. So, for example, for the hiring manager who has very limited time to read your case study, you want to make sure it's easy for them to like digest and scroll in a few minutes. So maybe you're using, you can try some quick tips like using scannable headings. You want to make sure that paragraphs, like you can look through paragraphs that you have or like details that you have and then try to like craft a heading for it. So maybe for your research purposes, instead of even being very predictable and saying, oh, research, you can say understanding how users use these particular products, or um, yeah, understanding how users use the product, or learning more about the people who use it. You can just be creative, but just make sure that the heading is scannable. Like um, if I was flipping through the page and I wasn't trying to read every sentence or every word, then I should still be able to get a very clear idea of what your case study or your project is about from your headings. So I would know that, okay, so there was some research phase and there was some testing phase and all of that from just like seeing the headings that you put in there. And this also helps SEO searches and like just some semantical arrangements. For example, if you are posting on Medium, the way that you arrange the entire article in terms of like headings would also help your search results, would also help people to, it just makes a better reading experience essentially. So you want to use headings. You also want to look through your sentences and your paragraphs and make everything short. I think I'll probably like add a few resources if you guys are interested. For in terms of writing, you want to use like direct active verbs and shortened sentences, use full stops often. Essentially, like you want to look through what you currently have and rewrite it. You're aiming to make everything 20% shorter. So if you've written story, cool. But like just know that you're essentially like trimming it down. So typically you will find that something that you're using three sentences or like two lines to say, you can probably find a way to like shorten into one sentence or one line. Yeah, and communicate what is most important. And then you rewrite it again and again, and finally you at some point you know that you're done with the final output. And then also another tip is to replace text with visuals. So I'm very sure we're all familiar with saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So essentially, this is also another hack. If you notice that you have a long body of text or a long body of work, you can think about how to translate that into like visual artifacts, visual images that would essentially make it look like you have little text and more visuals. It will be more engaging for the reader. They will most likely like look at it. But even with visuals, you also have to be wary to not use small thumbnails. I see a lot of case studies as well where you're putting maybe you're putting user flows or flow diagrams, and you're essentially not even thinking about, okay, what does this look like on mobile? If somebody clicks on this image and they try to like like should they even have to zoom in before they can read what is on this particular visual artifact? Should I not make it instead of trying to post one image that would include everything and have like really little text that people can't even read? How about I like break it down and maybe show only what's important, or like include multiple images instead with like a larger text that people can actually read? So you want to think about things like that. And I think also with visuals, you also want to think about the overall size, the overall like size of the artifacts that go into that particular body of work. So you might want to use image optimizers like Cloudinary, for example, to reduce the size of your images, or if you're using GIFs, also like try to optimize them so that you're also being inclusive in a way, thinking about people that might be opening this case study in environments where maybe the internet is not so good, or people that might even be impatient. If you're thinking about the hiring manager, for example, and I load your case study and I'm seeing broken images or empty images for the first 5 minutes, I won't really like give you. Anyways, the point is that you want to make sure that you're putting images, but yeah, make optimize it. Make sure that you think about the experience of people actually interacting with it and make it good. You also want to think about prototypes. Like if you can, where you sorry, did you want to ask me a question? I think somebody just unmuted them. Like,
No, you can go
okay,
on,
I'll just
please.
continue. Yeah. So yeah, where you can definitely use like motion or prototypes, make it more engaging, draw people in. Um, if you think a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a prototype is worth 1,000 static images or 1,000 static artboards. So where you can put motion, put prototypes, make it exciting, make it engaging. Um, yeah, and that's pretty much it. Those are the tips I have for you today. Do you have any questions?
Okay, thanks a lot, Lola. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, the session has been really, really insightful. I'm taking notes, and my notes are practically full. So we'll open the floor now to a couple of questions. Um, Jarat, can you please mute your mic? Okay, if there are any questions, you could signify, drop on chat box or unmute your mic so we could handle your questions, please. If there are any
Good evening,
questions,
Lola.
are there any questions?
Hi, good evening.
Yeah, thank you so much for this session. Very informative and inspiring. I was happy to join in. So thank you very much. So I actually do have a question. So it's about UI UX in general. So looking at UX, we know that definitely there are a lot of career path there. So I for one, I'm interested in UI UX. So I started off as in UX. So I'm currently taking a course with IDF. So I want to know now, like being a UI specialist, can you just specialize on maybe just be a UX writer or you be a UX researcher? Like I know that UX is broad, like definitely. As in there are a lot of opportunities there. Let's just put it as that. So like or we just advise someone to do like most of that okay, yeah, I'm a UX professional. I can do anything that involves UX or just stick to one. So I will want it to like being that a professional,
Sorry,
like
can
should
you
just
clarify on that question a bit? I'm not.
okay. I said UX, like UX as a career. I said there are different career paths there, as in there are different paths that you can do towards becoming a UX. So I said at least I know about being a UX researcher. I know about being a UX writer. So I was like, we advise that someone does everything or someone just focus on one. That's what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Okay, fair. Okay, regarding that question, I would say that it's especially like while you start out learning, it's not possible or easy to take on everything. If you do that, you probably find yourself like running in circles a lot, or you feel like there's just so much information or so much that you're learning, and you're not sure how much progress you're making. I would advise that you start with the fundamentals of um, yes, essentially just like pick a field and start. If you want to start out with your UI design, like make UI elements, um, really just hone in on that interface part of it I would recommend reading books like Refactoring UI as well. Or if you're not somebody that likes to read and you learn better with video based learning, then you can also like watch videos. I know that there are videos for Refactoring UI as well. Just like really just pick a part essentially. For me, I started out with UX, and when I started, I really took my time with like just learning more about UX. I was on interaction design, so I was taking courses as to the psychology of design and like just really learning the fundamentals of UX because that is where I started from. It doesn't mean that eventually I didn't like delve into UI, but yeah, essentially you want to ease yourself into it. Don't start out thinking that, oh, today somebody's doing UX writing, I think I should check this out. Oh yeah, somebody is doing this, I think I should check this out. You'll just be going around in circles. But yeah, and also it helps to, just look at certain courses. You can even Google. I think for anything that I've ever tried to learn, the first step is like Googling roadmap. So the word and roadmap, like, oh, UI designer roadmap 2022. What do you need to learn? How to use, is it how to use Figma, prototyping tools, elements of visual design? What do you need to learn? And then you now break those down based on the amount of time that you have to learn it. So yeah, so essentially maybe you say this week I'm trying to learn how to use Figma and how to prototype on Figma. Next week I'm learning the elements of visual design or how to, you can just like break it down by doing research and just choosing to stick to a particular scope or a particular part of design for some amount of time. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
good
thank you so
evening.
much.
Good evening. My name is Ezra. You are again. My name is Ezra. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah,
Yes, we can. It's very clear.
Okay.
I can hear
Okay.
you.
Okay. Please. I started UI UX since 2020, but then I was motivated by my friend to learn it. But the guy is a good UI designer. I don't know about UX. He's not really that good on it, so he motivated me to go into UI UX. And right now, I'm still having difficulties on UX, but then I don't know. I'm yet to register for any course, so I need a platform where I can register a UX design. Or better still, can I go with the UI because I can do something very well. I know how to set typography, images, and the rest of it. So I was thinking, is it that UX is good for me too, or I should just focus on because now somebody gave me
Oh,
a
your
project
volume
and
just
he
went
just
down,
gave me.
Kevin.
Okay, he gave me a project. Someone gave me a project some time ago, and he just said I should help him fix a rental application. But then I'm not really good on UX, so what do I do? He just said I'm a UI UX designer, so I should just help him fix it, and it said it's going to pay me. But then I'm not really the guy that is good in UX. So I don't know. What do you advise? Should I stick to the UI or should I stick to the? Should I go with UX also?
Yeah, so don't misunderstand me. When I say that you stick to a particular section, it doesn't mean like, oh, only like choose to interact with UI stuff or only choose to interact with UX stuff. I think you find that a lot of these things are intertwined. You can't be an effective UI designer without knowing UX fundamentals or knowing UX principles. Because essentially, like, what would you be basing your designs off of if you're not even thinking about how the end user would interact with this thing you're designing or interact with your solution? So, in as much as, I mean, it depends on you and the capacity that you currently have. If you feel like you want to specialize in UI, you can, but you also need to learn the fundamentals of user experience design. So essentially thinking about stuff like um, how um, how people will interact with the solution that you're creating, or like what their experience would be like while interacting with the boxes that you're drawing or like the components you're creating. um it won't be complete. You can collect the money, but it will tell that maybe you're not doing such a great job because you don't have this core like user UX fundamentals. So I would recommend, like, just brushing up. You can literally Google, or you can find stuff on Medium. I know that there are like tons and tons of summaries of articles that essentially like share quick UX tips. Another quick tip that I use is like, maybe when you're trying to design a component, if you're designing say for example input fields, you can just Google UX, no, input field UX practices or something. You see like a dozen articles that will tell you, okay, so when you're designing an input field, what is the UX part of it that you have to think about? Is it that, okay, does this have focus states for in terms of accessibility, or should it have like suggestions for what people should type in, or like how should I show error states, stuff like that. You can typically Google these things. If you want a more comprehensive course, you can like sign up on Interaction Design Foundation. I know that they have a few like really good UX courses. There's also like Coursera and stuff. Essentially, like you can just make it a habit to passively learn about UX or actively learn about UX in your daily workflow. And like when you're trying to design a UI component, instead of just starting straight with, oh, how will this UI component look? Should it have a curve border radius or blah blah blah? You actually Google, okay, what are the best effective UX practices in relation to this UI component? How can I enhance the UX of this? Yeah, that should help.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for your response, Lola. So, are there any other questions? You can take like two more before we let her go. Are there any questions? Okay, if there are no other questions, Lola, I was wondering if you would share the slides with us because I got DMs about the slides.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I would tweet it after this call or something, or share with you. You can share with everyone.
Okay, thanks a lot. So the channel is being recorded, so it's ought to be on our YouTube channel during the week. But since we have been having slight challenges with that, I'll share the Google Drive we usually store all our videos. So when it's up on our YouTube channel, you can also check it out. But in the meantime, please follow Lola on Twitter and LinkedIn, Medium as well. She has great articles on Medium, so you could basically learn about her design process and journeys and stuff like that. So, Design with You usually is every Sundays by 8 p.m. We have students that has come from all over to basically share insights about design and what's not. So, this has been really enlightening, Lola. So, thanks a lot for this session. We'll have another session next week, 8 o'clock on Sunday. We'll be featuring the CTO, co-founder of Spire. So, same time, same link, essentially. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Thank you very much, Lola. Really appreciate the time.
Oh, okay. I think some people are requesting that I share the link to my page. So let me just quickly. I mean, you can literally find me on most places on the internet as well, Lola Salehu, but I'll just share the link anyways.
Okay, someone's asking a question. I don't know if you could take that before you leave.
What's the question?
Okay, so she's saying most of us use your portfolio as inspiration, but she noticed that it's been locked for the past week. That's about your own
Which
portfolio
one?
now, Notion page on Notion.
Oh, my old Notion portfolio. So I don't know what's the question there.
She was asking if you could open it back up.
Well, I mean, I have a more recent portfolio, so I didn't want people to like still be making reference to that. But I'll think about it, and yeah, you know if I open
Okay,
it or not.
that'd be great. That'd be great. So if there is nothing else,
Okay.
so we'll call it a
Anyways,
night for this night. Thanks a lot for stopping by, Lola. We really appreciate your time. You know how busy you can be, so thanks a lot.
yeah, no problem. All right. See you guys.
Good night, guys.